Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Nick Drinks. I am your host, Nick Britsky. Today we are celebrating Michigan Wine Month.
Nick Drinks.
And I am very excited to have the winemaker over at Aurora Cellars. This is Drew Perry. They are up in Lake Leelanau, Michigan, and we're very excited to have him here. Drew, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is all a little bit new to me. We've been trying to reach out as much as we can on social media. But yeah, like I had mentioned to you earlier, this is just me trying to get out of my shell and trying to reach out to people a little more. But this is cool. This is fun.
Well, this is fun. And you said you are largely behind the scenes. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of production. We do a lot of different vineyards, a lot of different styles of wine. We actually have multiple production facilities. So I don't often have time to go up and really talk with a lot of people. I like to make time for wine dinners and special events, but the tasting room is not my specialty and not somewhere I spend a lot of time.
Well, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it. I'm sure the
Yep,
dozens of people that are watching it are going to be super appreciative. So thank you.
absolutely.
How would you so Michigan wine is certainly kind of up and coming on the national stage. I'm obviously very familiar being a Michigan guy. What would you
Mhm.
kind of say Aurora is in kind of the grand scheme of things? Are you like a big, a little, a medium?
We are a sort of a medium with growth intentions.
Great.
We have quite a bit of vineyards underneath us, so we have the ability to scale. We've been planting at least 10 acres every year for the last few years.
Wow.
So our goal is to grow. We know what we are. We like to focus on a lot of single varietals, a couple of different blends. But for the most part, we're just trying to kind of slip right into that sort of middle tier where everything's very obtainable, but it's a lot of just really extreme craft style of winemaking, where we're really taking a lot of time and taking all the right steps to do everything we can to make the greatest thing we possibly can.
I mean, that's great to hear. How long
Mhm.
have you been in the industry doing some sort of winemaking role?
About 15 years
Okay, so
now.
you've definitely seen the evolution of Michigan, I feel like. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah. It's been an interesting thing. Even before that, I was at Michigan State University. My father was actually the head of horticulture,
huh,
which had the the enology and viticulture department under it.
hmm,
So I mean, I'd always been exposed to that, and I got to know the wine industry at a pretty much a young age. So yeah, seeing where it's grown, it's pretty mind blowing to see where it is now. I rarely recognize it anymore when I really step out and go out and about. Um, but it's exciting, It's one of those things where I think the people who originally really started doing this, they felt like this could happen, and now we're kind of slowly starting to see that really come to fruition.
that's great. And I feel like over the years, when I was younger, kind of just getting into drinking and kind of coming of age, the Michigan wines were definitely like, oh, Michigan wines. You wouldn't see a lot of like, even like the varietals named on here. It would be like red wine, sweet wine, table wine. So the fact that all of yours are labeled and the fact that you said you're doing craft stuff, I think is really great and inspiring. What have you seen kind of, has Michigan kind of come on the national stage now?
Yes, we still wrestle, and the reason we wrestle, it's not necessarily an exposure. We get a lot of good exposure from people who really know the wine industry. I feel like our biggest sort of thing that we need to get around is people's expectations
Hmm,
of what it's going to be. They're so used to drinking one style of wine
yeah.
that they're a little thrown off when they venture to our style, because we're not a big West Coast style. Obviously, we're not a hot region.
Mhm.
People call us cool climate. We're cold climate, borderline. We really focus on a totally different element of winemaking, which is primarily aromatics, and also, well, really the acidity as well, and acidity as a positive, as a food friendly partner, basically. So
So when you talk about kind of a cooler climate, does that lend itself to certain grapes and varieties?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Our strength is anything aromatic,
Okay.
and that can be reds. Primarily whites. We do really well. The first thing we always have to think about is, can it survive?
Yeah.
And then we kind of move on to the next step: is, can it ripen? But once we found those varieties that really do well, we figured out not only what does well, but what each variety's strength is. So you have wines like you have varieties like Riesling, varieties like Gewurztraminer, where they're very aromatic centric. And our climate, which has these nice night day dynamics of really hot temperatures during the day, cool temperatures at night, really lends well to some interesting flavor development.
So if we can't get those big, bold, huge reds, what are
Yeah,
some of the white grapes that really, really stand out? Or sorry, not white grapes, white wines.
yeah.
Is it the Gewurztraminers, the Rieslings? Those are the ones that really thrive in this climate?
Yeah. I mean, if you really, it's pretty easy to just kind of like think about, sort of the regions like the Alsace. You can even get as crazy as Rias Vasas, where even Albarino we're going to be planting here pretty soon.
Neat.
That's something I've been trying to champion for a while. It's things that we know the cold tolerance, we know what can survive. Gewurztraminer always does well, but it comes down to whether or not people appreciate that type of aromatic. But things like Pinot Blanc, things like Chardonnay. Chardonnay is pretty much the champion of all white varietals. It'll survive just about anything, and it's one of the best at ripening. Pinot Grigio, I will always stand behind Grigio as much as it gets bashed. I think it's a great wine to make and a great wine to play around with. But yeah, I mean, wines like Chardonnay, we can always rely on being able to grow those every year and do something fun with it.
So we are just looking at a small selection of what is actually available.
Yeah.
I held off on some of the sparkling because I'm going to do some cocktails actually with the sparkling.
Okay.
But what we are looking at right here is Chardonnay. Is that what we agreed on starting with?
Yeah, it looks like it. Yep.
Okay, so let's open up the Chardonnay. Talk a little bit about what you guys did with this one.
So that Chardonnay, that's going to be a barrel fermented Chard, a little bit against what is currently really popular. But I do a lot of basically all styles of Chardonnay, whether it's stainless or barrel fermented. In a year like we had in 2017, it was an interesting year because it was really cool for a long period of time, and it took till the fall to really warm up at all. So it was a really lagging year, a year we didn't think could really come around. Then all of a sudden the fall just spiked. So we were able to do some fun and creative things. But a year like that, you're generally going to retain a lot of acidity, which is good for food. But yeah, this wine, it's a pretty traditional, just barrel fermented. We took it into barrels. Majority of these ones were actually older because we took on a lot of vineyards really fast. So we had to build a barrel program really fast, which is hard to do with a lot of newer oak. So we had a lot of second, third, fourth use oak that we used for this program. And it was just one of those wines that, you take it to barrel, stir it every day, and then stir periodically for the next 9 months until you're ready to bottle it.
Pretty traditional barrel size?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just all Burgundy barrels. Yeah, when it comes to our wines, my philosophy is Burgundy all the way. When it comes down to just barrels in general, I always prefer Burgundy barrels, even with non-traditional varietals. I like the way that toast profile works with our wines. A little more mineral, it's a little less intrusive. I just find it does well. Also, from just the way the lees lay, I always prefer Burgundy versus Bordeaux. Nothing wrong with Bordeaux barrels, but it's just our wines can get overwhelmed if they're not properly matched with the right barrel.
So I'm digging this quite a bit. It has a kind of like a medium low acid. It has just a little bit of barrel characteristic on it. It's not like super buttery or anything crazy like that, which is good. I love the minerals. Yeah. The mineral pop on here is great.
Butter is a very intentional thing. You don't have to have it. So that's a winemaker's choice. I mean, I'm always against it at any possible point. So.
Well, and I feel like I saw a lot of pushback recently with Chardonnay, kind of getting away from some of that barrel and really wanting that stainless. So to have this, which just has some nice light notes on it, I think is great. I kind of like the old oak.
I do. Yeah, it is nice. Well, especially for that vintage. That vintage would have had a hard time with a lot of new oak. So it was nice having a little more of that neutrality, mostly for the aging that the barrel allows. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to barrel fermented, I will never get away from barrel fermented because just like anything, it's going to come back around. Just like anything in wine in general, whether it's Merlot, eventually it's going to come back around. barrel fermented Chardonnay. Eventually it's going to come back around. So while I'm also doing a lot of stainless because it's fun to do, I'm never going to give up on barrel fermented Chardonnay because it's one of the most fun winemaking processes there is.
So that's it. So this is the 2017.
Yep.
When did you sell this? When did this start going out? Is it
very recently, actually.
Okay. So 3 years ago, you had to be thinking about that. And when you think of like outside factors of, like, is sideways screwing up the Merlot, demand, like, how do you think about this stuff so far out? Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah, for me, luckily, I don't have to think about sales. So that's one thing I love as a winemaker, that I have people in that that are really good at that, and they're willing to let me approach them and say, let me say, I want to do this.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think there's something we can do with that? And usually they give me pretty good feedback, but for the most part, it comes down to, if we can do it and do a good job, it's gonna sell itself no matter what. There are plenty of varieties that just get really popular. You kind of have to decide whether or not you want to jump on that bandwagon. I'm at a point now where I feel pretty confident in the varieties we do and do well, and regardless of trend, I'm going to stick to it pretty much regardless. So I think the more you get crazy and experiment, the more you're going to have a hard time really developing much of a following, and you're not going to be able to scale very well either. So
when you pick the grape and you're testing the grape and you're starting to explore it, how much are you letting the grape drive the decision versus kind of the style drive the decision?
100% the grape.
Oh, great.
That's always been my philosophy. People will constantly ask me, as a winemaker, what is your philosophy? And I always tell them, and it's not to be a jerk about it, I just always tell them my philosophy is to never have a philosophy. Because the point of that is, you need to know as much as possible. You can never be stuck in wanting to do something a certain way. If you take everything and try to mold it in your fashion, mold it to be what you want it to be, you're gonna fail. But if you can have at least 8 backup plans deep as to what you want to do, you're gonna come up with the best thing to do with that fruit from that vineyard and that vintage. And that's what's the most important.
And I love it. That is such like a craft, excellent way to think about it. So that makes me really excited.
Yeah.
So Gewurztraminer has been a huge fan of kind of like the Britsky household. My dad was a big fan of kind of German Alsatian wines.
Yeah.
And there is some sweetness on here.
Yep.
Okay. So talk a little bit about what you did with this wine, and are people like actually picking it up?
So Gewurztraminer is a tough one. Where I like making it, it has very interesting nuance aromatics. To me, Gewurz is the cilantro of the wine world. It is one of those things that people either love it or they can't stand it because the aromatics are different. The aromatic profile is so much different, especially if you're trying to really extract from the skins. One thing in Michigan that people got to be really well known for was doing long skin extractions, where you pretty much get all the rose and the thorn of the rose in the aromatics, where it's just it's bitter, it's sharp, and potpourri. Try to back off of that over the last few years and really kind of develop a more nuanced style where there's some skin contact, but for the most part, you're just trying to go for more subtlety because Gewurz can be so expressive. And Gewurz itself, medium sweet. The reason it's medium sweet is because it doesn't take much sweetness to balance off of what is normally a lack of acidity in Gewurztraminer.
So how would you use this? Would you use this as something kind of at either like an opening course or more towards the end of a meal?
It would have to be something. I'd always say that you'd have to find a food that really speaks to this wine more so than anything.
Maybe like an aperitif then.
Huh?
Like an aperitif, like something before the meal.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, the thing is with that oddball balance of sugar to acidity, you really have to be choosy with a wine like that. I feel like when it has a lot of acidity, you have a lot more versatility in what you can pair it with.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's got that type of a structure, you need to be more delicate and really be choosy. A lot of people like your spicier dishes when it comes down to Gewurztraminer. Whether it's you're going Indian or Korean. But be a little creative, be fun, and just kind of find out how those like little subtle lychee aromatics, how those really pop, and what's going to really get those to be kind of fun and expressive.
Yeah, I could see kind of bold flavors would go well with this. Maybe cutting some of that spice. Low ABV, which is kind of nice as well.
Yeah.
Lower-ish.
Kind of a natural Michigan thing.
Is it? Okay, so the heat's really going to drive the ABV?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where, I don't try to boost it much. If we get a really hot year, I'll let it ride, but I try not to kick the ABV up a whole lot. I like to do the least amount of alteration to the juice as I possibly can. So for the most part, it's just mostly vineyard work, let the vineyard grow the grape. And then after that, we're trying not to alter the juice too much, just kind of guide it.
So talk about that. If you were trying to boost the ABV, are you looking at adding like sugar?
Yep.
Sure. That's it. Okay. Yep. Just like booze.
Yeah, adding sugar, and generally speaking, I don't really feel like it needs a ton. There's definitely points at which, okay, this is not enough. But for the most part, with Gewurztraminer, a wine like that, I'm stopping it early, naturally. So
for the sweetness,
that one, it could have been high alcohol, but because we basically stopped it with cold early, it didn't chew through all that sugar that it naturally had. So you're left with a lower alcohol all around. So I mean, that could have been up above 13 had we let it run dry. But yeah, I always prefer to use the grape's natural sugar rather than having to add back.
Okay. All right. So next you're saying the Blaufrankisch.
Yeah,
You say Blau.
Blaufrankisch.
Okay.
Yeah, I instinctively always want to say Blaufrankisch because it sounds good, but it's Blaufrankisch.
Okay. I'm doing my best not to have like a Blazing Saddles reference in here.
Yeah, it's also known as Lemberger, which would be the more common name, but let's not pretend like either is really a great name. But it's all just because of its origins, where it came from, where it was imported from, that it got that name. So, yeah.
And I have very little familiarity with this.
Okay, well then this is gonna be interesting then.
Okay.
Because let's call this the Gewurztraminer of the red world.
Okay.
Where the aromatics are quite a bit different from what you might be prepared for. Think Germanic red, think cracked black pepper and blueberry reduction before you get into it. It's always, the tannin structure is always very interesting. It has a lot of tannin potential, but it's always very delicate and always very light. The aromatics are very unique in Blaufrankisch. It's something, I would recommend something with like a lamp. Yeah, it's a fun wine to make, but it is so much different than what people are always are prepared for. The aromatics are unique, but that's one thing I think is fun about it, is to try to drive those varietal characteristics out of it. Yeah, and that is sort of the just kind of comical exaggeration of a natural expression of the varietal characteristics.
I mean, it screams black pepper.
Yep. Yeah, not green pepper, which is what I'm always thankful for. Yeah, and that's just a varietal character. It does start to lose that once you get really extremely ripe. We rarely see that in Michigan. That's something you more see in maybe Washington, where you get sort of over that level where you lose varietal character. That's what I like about growing something like that here, is that you get so much fun expression of the variety.
Oh, that's really neat. Oh, that's really great.
It's a very unique red wine. Still has some acidity. It's still
just
delicate.
A little bit of tattern.
Yep.
That's super fun. All right, so this is a German, typically?
Yep. Okay. Austrian. Yeah.
Okay. Because Germany doesn't have a ton of reds, right?
No,
it's kind of like a Michigan thing?
You're talking about your Pinot Noir, things like that. All your Burgunders.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that quite a bit. Is anyone else doing that in Michigan?
Yeah. It's been one of those things that once people figured out that it's something that we can do, we can grow well. It just took a few wine writers to pay attention and say, hey, pay attention to this, and kind of get it out there. And we started to get some attention nationally and internationally. While it's a bit of an oddball red, we can do it to its varietal correctness just about better than anybody. So yeah, I mean, it's starting to really gain ground. You'll see more and more of it in the coming years. We have about 5 acres of it. There's a few other producers in Michigan that have it as well. It just depends on your clientele as to whether or not that's a red they can truly appreciate. But we never have really any issue with sort of wine writers and wine geeks getting behind it. So
Great. So talk a little bit about distribution. Is it only at the winery, or how far out does it get?
It depends on the wine itself.
Okay.
We do have our wine club, of course, and that you're able to get pretty much everything through. You can also order anything online. But in terms of just going to a store, we do have more core wines that will commonly be distributing to stores. So.
Okay. So I'd say a decent amount of the people that watch my stuff are in Metro Detroit. Is there any one place that you want to shoot them, or maybe better yet, go to the website?
Website is the best place to go if you want to just really choose from a lot of different things.
Okay.
In terms of what we typically are distributing, we're distributing Gewurztraminer, we're distributing our Riesling. We're not distributing currently our Cab or our Blau. You can always get those online though, easy enough, and we can ship very easily. You could always go, I mean, somewhere like we distribute at Costco or Meijer. So yeah, it is available. Our products are available.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I don't want our time to end, but I'll open the last one.
Yep. So Cab Franc has been one of those. It was the red that got the biggest push a while back, besides say Pinot Noir, in terms of Michigan vinifera. And so you see quite a bit of it. It's an interesting variety. It's one of those wines that's probably the biggest challenge in terms of growing, because you really have to do a lot of canopy management. You really have to be really paying attention because it's difficult to ripen, but it does still grow well here. It's just year in, year out, you're really gonna need to push hard to get it to fully ripen. So that's the biggest difficulty with it. But all in all, for us in a really good year, it can make for a really big wine. In a year that's just sort of so-so, it makes for a really interesting dynamic wine and its subtle characteristics. While this one here, it has some nice light tannin structures and good bite, it still has acidity, but it has some of those fun nuances, whether it's that sort of strawberry characteristics with some almost like eucalyptus in the background. It's a fun wine to work with, but it really takes a lot of pain in the vineyard in order to get it to where you want it to be. But it's something that we have quite a bit of acreage of, and there's a lot all over Michigan.
Yeah, that's certainly really, really easy to drink too.
Mm.
Canopy management really struck me right there. That sounds like a very fussy technique.
It is as long as you if you're doing it by hand, but if you have machines that can do it, then it's a lot more efficient, which we do. We are the biggest. We have the biggest vineyard company in northern Michigan, so we've had to go largely mechanized.
Okay.
So that's So we have a larger kind of company behind us, and Harbor Hill Fruit Farms is our vineyard management company. And that company, we have around 400 acres that we manage, and we've had to go largely mechanized just because of the current climate of just getting people and really just being able to do good detailed work. And there's a lot of really good mechanized ways of managing a vineyard in a really quality manner. So basically, you really want to control your growth, get good sun exposure, things like that.
And I think you just think of all the tools that you have access to. It's really not just planting the grapes in the ground, because honestly, that's been done for you.
Yeah.
It's you got pruning, you got canopy, irrigation, chemicals. What are your kind of thoughts on some of that?
Irrigation, we don't irrigate right off the bat ourselves, but we are very pro irrigation in other people's sites, which we don't know them as well. So if we're planning for someone else we don't know it as well, we will recommend it because it's a good way to start. It's very important in terms of those first 4 years. After that, you rarely need it. In terms of chemicals, it depends on what your issue is, but there's ways of sustainably doing it that aren't just slash and burn. As long as you're proactive, you don't have to be corrective. And it's usually the corrective farming that's the worst for the environment. But yeah, no, I'm very lucky. I mean, I get to work with the vineyard manager every day where we talk about everything that we do, everything we want to do. And I can't make the wine I want to make without being able to shape it from pruning on. I need that's where the decisions start. It's not just get in the fruit and then ferment. Fermentation is maybe a 12th of the job of a real winemaker. There's so much more to it. So
yeah, because then you have all the tools that you have access to once you get it in and all. I mean, I feel like I learn about a new one every day, and there's always new technology coming out too, which is crazy. So this is super, super fun. People want to learn more about the winery. Talk about where they can find that information.
You can go to auroracellars.com. You can find our website there. It'll tell a little bit of our story, who we are. You can find our online website there where we can place orders. That's usually the best thing to do. I'm fairly certain we are on Instagram and all of those social media type things that I am not so well versed in. So, but yeah, we're very easily accessible. We're located right in the heart of Leelanau County. A beautiful region, known for its cherry farming and slowly becoming known more so for its grapes than anything.
Excellent. And did you start doing all the wine work right out of college?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was class of 2004.
I went to school for like 7 years and nobody calls me a doctor, unfortunately. So
I'm curious if we overlapped at all.
2005.
So we were in school at the same time then.
Yep. Yeah, we would have.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, very good. Well, you would have seen me on the marching band.
No, nice.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you. This was super, super fun. As I said, we have 2 more of the sparklings, the rosé and the blanc to try. Because I'm more of a cocktail guy, we're going to be making some cocktails with that. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we're really excited. What a great way to celebrate Michigan Wine Month. We're certainly hopefully going to send some people there and pick up some wine. But Drew, thank you so much. I appreciate all your time.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun.
Excellent. If you want to find more about Nick Drinks, you can find me at nickdrinks.com, youtube.com/nickdrinks, and Nick Drinks all spelled out for my social media. Thank you so much. Until next time. Cheers.